SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good morning and welcome back to the lecture series on partition of India in print media and cinema. We are discussing Refugee, Desh and Nation. In our last class, we have discussed in detail on the Marichapi incident, which remained under discussed till a long time after it happened, and I also talked about the curious tendency or inclination that we see in current scholarship, which is which is showing its interest, which is discussing this chapter in details. Since the recent past, I mean, many questions, many new observations that have emerged through new observations, new perspectives that have emerged through interviews, through testimonials, confessions, and as well as highlighting of official reports, official recordings, actually open up a new vista of knowledge, open up new meanings about Dalit experience, new meanings about Dalit refugees experience, about the caste class politics in West Bengal. Today we are going to look at the Punjab partition and refugee resettlement in the western side. So, the 1947 forced migration across the Punjab borders actually challenged the question of roots, the fact that a person could ever have a permanent root or a permanent sense of belonging, anything, any category being fixed, unchanging and stable is questioned, is unsettled through the process of partition. And we see this a lot in fictions also. It once again it reminds us of the character of Amma in Jade, Ismat Chughta's short story, where she says that Vatan has become like in one part Amma says that the Vatan has become like the shoes in my feet, which we are required to wear and take off on command from above, or whenever we desire, we can actually we can embrace and then disown a Vatan. Is it like that? Is this the kind of existence that we anticipated? Is this why we fought for independence? So Vatan, the question of Vatan, the question of one's own home, did not remain a fixed category, something that would not change, and it had actually shaken the fundamental beliefs. I mean, or it had shaken the let us say the basis of human faith, and faith to humanity, faith to human relationships. Everything had become impossible at one point. So, the role the government publication of 1948 entitled Millions on the Move, painstakingly recording this refugee problem, and it draws attention to the various state agencies and their roles in this process of migration. So, Millions on the Move initiates this vision of a uniform refugee migration experience, and that is something which is being challenged by the recent scholarship, both from on Punjab partition and Bengal partition. We can now see the layers which were kind of glossed over, the layers which were overlooked through the picturization of a uniform refugee experience. So, Millions on the Move associated the idea of migration with or the process of migration with iconic images of kafilas. Kafilas were men, women, children migrating, walking on foot with their heavily laden bullock carts, traveling across tracks of muddy soil. So, traveling in sun, traveling in scorching heat, and inundated by the monsoon rains. And we have, so on the one hand we have the image of these kafilas, on the other we have the trains that are overloaded with people perching on the roofs, people sitting on the running boards, and the trains that are otherwise packed with refugees. So, actual reality, however, was different from this standard portrayal. So, partition is synonymous with such overloaded trains and kafilas. However, on further study, on further examination, we see that anticipatory migration had happened, and they were initiated by the wealthy sections such as the moneylenders, the businessmen, especially from places like Lahore and Rawalpindi. So, the poorer and politically less mobilized sections of Hindus were struggling till the end, and struggling to find a space of safety. They suffered the most in the process of exchange of population, and they were struggling till the end. For the richer sections, the wealthier sections, the British Overseas Airways Corporation transported 28,000 people from Pakistan between 15 September to 7th December 1947. This was an operation, a service available to the affluent sections. So, additionally, service was rendered by the Indian National Airways twice daily from Lahore to Amritsar. So, in case of the huge refugee camps at Kurukshetra, there were different levels of provisions depending on the refugee status. So, both in Punjab and in Bengal, we observe the class, caste, profession based gradations being reified, being brought back even in the even in camp situations. So, the upper caste people who were especially from white collar backgrounds such as the doctors, professors, engineers and other government officials would consciously maintain this gap from this gap or this distance with the Dalit refugees. So, rehabilitation, I mean indication of the state maintaining, and in fact the state policies abetted such maintenance of hierarchies, hierarchies in terms of caste, in terms of gender, in the process of refugee rehabilitation. And this is visible, for example, in the provision of separate colonies being made for the untouchables and for the young widows. Post partition South Asia, as it was the post colonial countries in South Asia, as they were reviving from the shock of partition. They were also espousing the traditional social realities through the variables like religion and caste. The basic attitude of the government abetted this process. So, building materials were inferior for the poorer types of accommodations made for the untouchables, and their accommodations would be housed away from the main localities used by the elites. So, throughout the early 1950s, news were rife about buildings collapsing as a result of heavy monsoon torrents, and 50 houses, for example, had collapsed in the 1950 monsoon rains at the Haripura refugee colony for untouchables in Amritsar. So, we see this story of rehabilitation as it is being parceled and sealed off at the governmental level, at the official level, concludes that the refugee problem was finally overcome once and for all. It gives a rosy picture, in fact, of the displaced people who had been, it was asserted that they were eventually integrated, fully integrated into the nation building process. They were assimilated into the nation building activities of the Indian state. And then we have the standard picture of the resilient refugees who had transitioned from their helpless destitute status to become the full-fledged citizens, and this was accomplished largely as a result of their own resilience, because of their own resilience. There is, we see that in the official account, despite not wanting to engage with or focus on the failures of the rehabilitation process, as well as the inadequacies, the setbacks of these processes, these policies, the official accounts do point out how the refugee problem is interspersed with the question of nation building, and how the political atmosphere has since developed throughout the subcontinent in all the post-colonial nations. So, like I said, the later scholarship was interested in focusing on, in studying the nuances and the differentials that explained the migration process. Ravinder Kaur notes that the duration of the journey and the means of transport used to undertake the journey are crucial indicators of the class differences that significantly alter the experiences of displacement. So, the mode of commuting, how much one could afford to take with oneself, and how much one could spend in the process of migration, where one could buy a land, whether one could buy a land at all these things determined, they actually reflected one's foothold in the new society. Official histories of refugee resettlement provide a homogenized view of the refugee state encounters. So, in reality, like I have already stated several times now, this process was determined by factors such as one's literacy, social capital, political connections, and so the experience was different for each individual depending on where they came from depending on where he came from. So, the new understandings, the new historical understandings of resettlement and rehabilitation process are derived from the petitions or the dialogues that happened chiefly between the privileged upper caste refugees and the congressmen. So, the concepts, the meanings of resettlement, rehabilitation emerge from or they draw their meaning from this dialogue, a dialogue that is happening at the top level of power, you know, at the level, top level of power and influence. So, through the dialogue happening between the privileged upper caste refugees and the influential political people, dialogue happening between refugee representatives that were obviously elite people and the government officials. So, Ian Talbot notes that partition brought increased government controls and temptations for officials, and so post partition India saw a rule, I mean informally and unofficially speaking, it saw the rule of an influential section of people known as the license permit Raj. So, who could create license and for whom? And in this regard, we cannot ignore a very important film, Satyajit Ray's film Janaranya. So we cannot ignore Satyajit Ray's film Janaranya. In English, it's called The Middleman. And so the emergence of this middleman against a backdrop where there is a scarcity of job. So, an employable population and educated youth is seeking a job in a you know, country that is in a complete tumult, in a completely chaotic situation. And there is a section of furious youth that are qualified, educated, and yet not finding jobs. And that is when a new job is kind of invented, the job of the middleman. And there is a scene that is invested with a lot of irony, where a man is actually looking to sell a circus elephant. So, how one could the power of persuading to sell something, even if it had to be an elephant, and given the situation, given the poverty where people could not cover their own backs, their own you know, basic needs, who would buy an elephant? I mean, it's a scene invested with a lot of irony and dark humor, if we could call it so. So, it became, like Ian Talbot calls, a license permit Raj. A large number of refugees were involved in and promoting corruption, nepotism with respect to allotment of you know, vast amounts of abandoned property that were lying after the Muslim populace had emigrated, and people would forcefully sketchily, I mean people would forcefully and illegally occupy shops, houses and factories. So, refugees, there were many cases of refugees exploiting the system through exaggerating their losses in order to receive excessive compensation. Yet the worst abuses involved the locals actually posing as refugees. They were passing themselves off as refugees, and in a bid to get some benefits from the government, and officials that were involved in accepting bribes, politicians that tried to lay their hands on property. There is this chaotic scene very effectively portrayed by Bhisham Sahani in Tamas, where the refugees have come from West Pakistan to India, to Amritsar, and people, there is this accountant who is trying to chart out or document the losses. He is trying to document the losses of people, and he is doing it very mechanically. He is not interested in personal narratives. He has no time. He only records and recognizes number of family members that died, the amount of the figure of money. So, the total sum of money that was you know, lost, or the value of the property that was lost, left back in West Pakistan. And there is a point where a leader comes and says how this accountant is actually jotting down the information. He says that I have columns on my register book in terms of community, so Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, and so forth. And to this this honest man, an honest the honest politician, or the honest leader, he is not a politician, he is an activist. He suggests that there should be just 2 columns on the register, one recording how much the wealthy sections have lost, and the other that records the loss of the poorer sections. And that would in fact expose, as he urges, it would expose how much more disadvantaged the poorer people were as compared to the rich. So the divisions along or recording along communal lines was a farce. What mattered in the immediate post partition phase was one's economic clout, one's political and economic clout. So Ravinder Kaur studies the issue of untouchable perceptions in her work on Punjabi resettlement in Delhi, and how the state treated the untouchables and made them to form a separate refugee category. So they were provided with mud huts in a pre-existing Harijan colony called Rehgarpura near Karol Bagh. So untouchables were given jobs. The society was resuscitating, the society was bringing back all the caste class grids as soon as the initial storm had passed, and it was so the status quo came back. The untouchables would not be given more lucrative jobs than that of sweepers, cleaners with the municipality, or they were encouraged to set up shops as shoemakers. So these were the traditional occupations they had, and nothing changed for better in the case of the untouchables by and large. So maintenance of the traditional caste hierarchy was accompanied by poorer provision of facilities for these sections. So common people that are sympathetic and try to understand the plight of the refugee in the generic sense hardly pay attention to these fragmentations, these layers of meanings inscribed in the process of in the refugee experience. So they cannot they have not been able to discover or identify the social differences within the migrant population. Upper class refugees could, in general, generally speaking, they could meet their everyday needs of food and shelter on their own, and even could maintain their normal lifestyle in exile. So the regret that we hear about losses and the speculations about the disturbances and something that come from the elite sections, as Ravinder Kaur argues, may not be based on direct knowledge. So the elite sections were more spectators than actors in the partition drama, although they had of course they had mobilized the situation to begin with. They were the enactors and then the spectators, not so much in the receiving end. So the needs and strategies of the elite refugees were different from that of the ordinary refugees, and yet the emotive frame of refugee prefaced this common demand, the demand of houses, demand for houses, promotions and loans. So the The idea of self-rehabilitation carried two complementary processes. One was being made independent of the state upon the state's insistence, and the other was becoming self-reliant through one's active efforts. So, the goal was the same, but the push was coming from two different ends or two different directions. In one case, the government would urge people to become self-reliant, and then in another, the urge was coming from within, and this was related to the question of self-respect and upper caste pride, where a section of these people, both from Punjab and Bengal, would loathe the idea of taking money from the government. So, one's own active efforts as well as goading by the government, they went hand in hand, and they worked in tandem, worked simultaneously towards the common goal of relocating the newcomers on the citizenship map. Ravinder Kaur talks about this particular case. She studies the case of Keval Ram, a refugee who did not have any kind of resource to self-rehabilitate himself, and Kaur notes that while the officials at the resettlement office found his pleas as a waste of time and categorized him as a failure, it was hardly a matter of debate that the state had failed him, not only by not focusing on his needs, but also by thwarting his attempts to begin small-scale independent ventures. So, it was actually prestigious, seen from a different angle, to be called a self-reliant refugee. It carried the rhetoric of loss. So, for the elite people, there was this pride inscribed and hidden in this rhetoric of being or becoming a self-reliant refugee. On the one hand, this narrative implicitly celebrated the positions that they had back in their homeland. It wanted one's traction, the traction that one enjoyed back in pre-partition India, the status that one enjoyed, the traction that one enjoyed back back during the pre-partition times, and then one's capability, one's merit was also being greatly celebrated. How through the story of how one rebounded, how resilient the upper caste people were, and to have achieved and recovered everything that they lost back in their homeland. So, the status that had been raised was once again being recuperated, was once again being revived. Such narratives of success helped integrate the newcomers in the upper echelons of the host society. So, the moral capital that was invested in the imaginary of refugee would automatically make the upper caste people as the protagonists in the migration process. Yet these were the people that did not have much experience about much experiences of hardships and struggles that are popularly associated with the refugee experience, with refuginess, and yet they were the ones that were seen as the ideal example of refugee, the self-reliant refugee that should be emulated and modeled by each and every displaced person, someone that could manage with one's own social capital. So, one's position as a post-colonial citizen was shaped by the relationship one had with the state. So, the greater one had the ability to be, the more one was able to be self-reliant, the better one's chances of gaining a firm foothold in the new citizenry. So, the untouchables were at the bottom of the ladder, they could hardly bargain, they had to make do with whatever they were getting. Discriminations were made in terms of the accommodations, the employment prospects that were opened up for this section of refugees, and yet in their testimonies the credit for their social and economic success is duly given to the government for the little or whatever the government has done for the untouchables. They credit the government policies and the welfareist measures that were taken for are acknowledged by the Dalit refugees. So, the refugee problem actually reshuffled for once for a very short period after partition. It was threatening, it was tending to threaten social order, where especially the upper class people felt insecure on both sides of the border. They felt insecure that they might be conflated with the Dalits, and so the refugee problem might end up in the dislocation of caste, class and gender hierarchies. And so this is something that post independence Indian state actually considers with a great deal of precision, and wants to in a way bring back the gaps, bring back the differences. So, the early post independence Indian state devoted considerable resources to deal with this situation and erect one's original position, one's traditional positions in the society. So, the story of rehabilitation, the official accounts that we hear through the story of rehabilitation legitimized this process of hierarchization at the level of gender, class and caste. Such writings standardize the account of refugee experience through strategically obfuscating, not so much focusing on the complex reality, the layered reality. And so, what we get is almost, so it is basically obfuscating the complex reality. So, we are going to stop today's lecture at this point, and we are going to continue in the next class with more discussions on other topics on partition. So, let us stop at this point, and we are going to continue with further discussions in our next lectures. Thank you.